Beneath the golden domes of ancient Persia, where music floated through corridors lined with silk and gold, a different kind of silence ruled, the silence of fear. Every royal wedding was a grand celebration for the empire. Yet for the princess, it was the beginning of a night she could never forget. They called it a union blessed by the gods, but behind the jeweled curtains and perfumed candles, it was a ritual of obedience, not love. The princess, adorned in gold and trembling beneath her veil, knew what awaited her was not devotion, but duty. The empire demanded purity, perfection, and surrender. Some tried to escape. Others hid their tears behind painted smiles. The legends speak softly of those who vanished after that night, erased from the records, buried in silence. This is not just a tale of royal beauty, but of power, fear, and forgotten voices. A story buried under centuries of pride and tradition, where every glittering crown hid a secret, and every Persian princess prayed for dawn, long before her wedding night began. The Persian Empire, a land of eternal light, vast deserts, and golden palaces that shimmered like mirages beneath the sun. From afar it was a world of majesty and divine order, where kings were seen as chosen by the gods, and their daughters, the princesses of Persia, were jewels meant to glorify the throne. But within the marble walls of those magnificent palaces, the lives of these royal women were not as radiant as the legends told. Their beauty was their blessing, and their curse. From the moment a Persian princess was born, her life was not her own. She was taught to move with grace, to speak with restraint, and to dream only within the boundaries of royal expectation. The empire's honor rested on her shoulders. Her every breath, her every gesture, was a reflection of the dynasty's power. Yet amid the laughter of courtiers and the music of lutes echoing through long corridors, something darker lingered, a quiet whisper of fear that every princess learned but never dared to speak. The palace, though grand, was a prison gilded in gold. Each room was a world of silence, watched by maids, guarded by eunuchs, and bound by rules that dictated even when a princess could smile. She was educated in poetry, etiquette, and divine law, yet forbidden to choose her own fate. When she turned of age, her destiny would be sealed not by love, but by decree. The empire saw her not as a person, but as a vessel, a bond between kingdoms, a promise of loyalty, a tool of politics wrapped in silk and jewels. And so, when the day of her wedding was announced, the palace erupted with celebration. Perfumes filled the air, musicians played melodies that could make the moon weep, and courtiers praised the union as divine. To the people it was a fairy tale, the joining of noble bloodlines beneath the gaze of the gods. But for the princess beneath her golden veil, the weight of that night was unbearable. She had heard the stories whispered among the palace women, stories of brides who never smiled again, of nights that turned celebration into horror. Every Persian princess was told that her wedding night was sacred, a ritual meant to prove her devotion and purity. But no one spoke aloud what that ritual truly meant. Behind those jeweled doors, power revealed its cruelest form. The husband she had never known was now her master, and the empire demanded she obey without question. To resist was to dishonor her bloodline, and dishonor in Persia's royal courts was a crime no woman survived. Even as the candles burned bright, she felt the air grow heavy with fate. Her trembling hands hid beneath layers of silk, her eyes lowered, her voice swallowed by silence. Outside, fireworks lit the night sky and poets sang of love. Yet inside, love had no place. The Golden Palace, in all its splendor, became a cage of fear. For the royal family, the ritual was tradition. For the princess, it was surrender. She was taught that her pain was necessary, her silence noble, her tears divine. And so, generation after generation, Persian princesses entered their wedding chambers with hearts pounding and souls trembling, prisoners of the very beauty and honor they were born to uphold. They smiled for the empire. They bowed for the gods. But inside, they prayed for dawn to come quickly, for the night to end, and with it, their fear. Yet, not all accepted this fate. Some would question the old ways. Some would dare to defy the empire's silence, and some would vanish into history, their names erased, but their courage echoing like a hidden heartbeat through time. This was the world of the Persian princesses, a realm where power gleamed brighter than love, and where the most radiant night of their lives became the most terrifying of all. The Persian Empire was not merely a kingdom, it was an intricate machine of power, tradition, and divine law. Every heartbeat within its walls was governed by the will of the Shah, and every decision, even the smallest, carried the weight of cosmic order. To the empire's rulers, the royal family was not a family at all. It was a symbol, a divine lineage meant to project perfection to the world. Within this order, Persian princesses played a sacred yet perilous role. Their marriages were not made of affection or choice, but of strategy. A wedding was a political maneuver, a thread in the vast web that held the empire together. Every alliance, every vow, every whispered promise served a purpose far greater than love. A princess's smile at the wedding altar might have been the key to peace between rival provinces. Her silence might have saved her father's throne. But it was the laws surrounding marriage, ancient, unspoken, and merciless, that gave rise to fear. Persian law was built upon the belief that the purity of the royal bloodline was sacred. No union could risk corruption, and no woman of noble birth could carry the stain of defiance. To ensure this divine order, the empire devised rituals, secret traditions meant to prove the virtue of every royal bride. Some called them tests of loyalty, others whispered darker names. When the wedding procession ended and the empire celebrated in drunken joy, the princess would be led away from the light of the halls. Behind closed doors, she was no longer the empire's jewel. She was a subject of examination. Her fate rested in the hands of ancient customs, priests, and sometimes even spies of the court. These rituals were not written in law, but every noble knew them. To speak against them was treason. To question them was blasphemy. The Shah himself was said to watch over these traditions, ensuring that the honor of the empire remained untouched. Some rulers, drunk on divine right, saw the princesses not as daughters or wives, but as offerings to the gods of power. Their wedding night was not an act of union. It was a performance of loyalty. The empire demanded proof that its princesses would obey before they could rule, and so generations of royal women lived and died within that system of silence. Some believed that this was their destiny, that fear was the price of royalty. Others whispered that these laws of the throne were created not by gods, but by men afraid of women's strength. Yet no one dared to speak such thoughts aloud. The records that survived from ancient Persia tell little of what truly happened on those nights. The chroniclers, often men of the court, wrote of grand feasts, golden crowns, and royal blessings. They did not write of tears. They did not write of fear. But the poetry of the time hints at it. Verses of brides who prayed for mercy beneath silk veils, of queens whose eyes carried the moon's sorrow. In the quiet of the palace, the maids and handmaidens knew the truth. They prepared the princesses, bathed them in sacred oils, dressed them in gold and red, and whispered prayers for courage. Some of these women had seen too much. The trembling hands, the pale faces, the silent screams hidden behind jeweled curtains. They knew what the empire refused to see, that its most sacred ritual was also its darkest shadow. Yet amid all the fear, there was also strength. A few princesses dared to defy the ritual. Some refused to accept the laws that reduced them to symbols. They hid their defiance in poetry, in music, in coded words written on silk. They used silence as their rebellion. And though their names have faded from history, their courage became a quiet echo that still lingers in the ruins of ancient Persia. The secret laws of the throne were built to preserve power, but they also revealed its greatest weakness. For in trying to control every aspect of womanhood, the empire exposed its fear. The fear of what might happen if a princess ever chose her own destiny. Behind every story of the Persian court, every glittering banquet, every royal decree, there existed a silence more powerful than any crown. It was the silence of the princesses. Hidden behind silk veils and golden lattice walls, they lived unseen, unheard, yet always watched. To the world, they were divine symbols of grace and purity. To themselves, they were prisoners of their titles, women who learned to whisper their truths only to mirrors, maids, or the night wind that carried their secrets beyond the palace walls. From the moment a princess entered womanhood, she was taught that silence was strength, obedience was virtue, and fear was destiny. They were told their voices did not belong to them, that their words could shake dynasties. So they learned to speak in symbols, through poetry, song, and embroidered tapestries that carried hidden messages of sorrow and longing. Some of these fragments survive in ancient Persian poetry, their authors unnamed, perhaps purposefully erased. A verse reads, "I was born beneath the golden sun, yet I live in shadow. My tears fall soundless, for even sorrow must bow before the throne." It is said that such verses were written by a princess, perhaps one of Darius's daughters, or a consort of Xerxes, though no historian dares to name her. The fear of the wedding night, whispered through generations, was not merely about pain or ritual. It was about losing oneself. The realization that beneath the layers of silk and ceremony, the princess ceased to be a woman and became a symbol, a possession, a living offering to power. The maids who served them were often the only witnesses to their quiet despair. These women, often taken from conquered lands, understood what it meant to live without freedom. They became the princess's sisters in silence, the ones who listened when the royal daughter confessed her terror before the night of her wedding. Some would clasp her hands and whisper blessings. Others could only cry quietly as the drums of the celebration echoed through the marble halls. Yet not all princesses bowed to fear. There were those whose spirits refused to break, who found ways to fight within the cage. Some feigned illness to delay the ritual. Others wrote letters that never reached their intended readers, letters hidden in vases, carved into the undersides of mirrors, tucked into the hems of robes. A few escaped the palace entirely, disappearing into the vast deserts or seeking sanctuary in distant temples. History remembers them only as legends, the daughters of the wind, women who vanished from royal life but lived forever in the whispers of storytellers. In the quiet hours of the night, before the fateful ceremony, many princesses would sit by their window and look toward the stars. They would wonder if the gods truly favored such laws, if divinity could coexist with fear. In those moments, they were not queens nor symbols, but human, fragile hearts longing to love and to be free. A Persian philosopher once wrote, "The empire may command the body, but never the dream." And so, in their dreams, these princesses lived other lives, lives where they could choose their destiny, where the sound of laughter replaced the tremor of fear. Their dreams became the last refuge of their souls, but reality was unkind. The empire did not allow dreams to breathe for long. The walls of the palace were built not just of stone, but of secrets. Servants who spoke too freely disappeared. Poems were burned. Even memories were rewritten to fit the image of perfection the Shah demanded. Still, the truth could not be erased completely. The voices behind the veil survived, not in the official scrolls of history, but in the poetry of the people, in the songs of mothers who warned their daughters to beware of golden cages, and in the ruins where travelers still claim to feel a presence when the wind moves through the marble corridors. They feared their wedding nights not only because of what awaited them in the chamber, but because it symbolized the end of who they were allowed to be. Yet in that fear lived defiance, a quiet, invisible strength that no empire could crush. The Persian princesses, once silenced by power, became eternal in memory, not for their crowns, but for their courage to endure what history refused to see. The Persian palaces stood like mountains of gold and marble, symbols of divine order and eternal rule. Yet within those glittering walls there existed another world, one the poets dared not name. It was a realm of whispers, of locked chambers, and of truths buried so deep that only ghosts seemed to remember them. The empire's power was maintained not just through armies and conquests, but through secrets, and those secrets began within the royal chambers. Every room had eyes, every corridor had ears. The maids were spies in silk, the priests kept silent ledgers of sin, and the Shah's advisors traded information like weapons. What happened on a princess's wedding night was not merely personal, it was political. The purity of a royal bride determined alliances, legitimacy, and sometimes the fate of the throne itself. There were times when a marriage was arranged not out of devotion, but suspicion. If the Shah feared rebellion, he would marry a daughter of his rival to a loyal general, binding loyalty with fear. And if a princess resisted, her silence could be rewritten, her story reshaped by the empire to preserve its image. In the official records, she would be remembered as obedient, gentle, and blessed by the gods, even if her truth was erased with ink and fire. In these palaces, every curtain concealed a secret. Some whispered of forbidden love, princesses who dared to feel compassion for servants, guards, or scholars. Others spoke of betrayal, of women punished for dreaming beyond their titles. The empire allowed no disobedience, least of all from the royal bloodline. The forbidden truth was that the Persian court feared its own women. One chronicler, long forgotten, wrote a single line that survived through centuries. The king ruled with the sword, but the women ruled with silence. Behind that silence was a power the Shah could not control: emotion, empathy, and will. Many princesses learned to survive by mastering the art of secrecy. They smiled when watched, wept when unseen, and used their intelligence as their only weapon. Some became quiet diplomats, influencing politics from the shadows. Others became protectors of their families, negotiating peace through their hidden counsel. But the wedding night, that sacred, terrible ritual, was the emperor's way of reminding them who truly held power. It was the night the throne reasserted its dominance over every woman in the dynasty. Yet as centuries passed, some rulers began to question the cruelty of their own customs. A few princes, unlike their fathers, saw the pain behind the golden rituals. Secretly, they allowed their brides freedom, rewriting the ceremony into one of respect rather than fear. But such moments of mercy were rare and dangerous. One legend tells of Princess Azar, whose beauty was said to outshine the moon. On her wedding night, she refused to perform the ancient obedience ritual. She tore her veil, declaring before the royal court that no goddess would demand a woman's humiliation. Her defiance shook the empire. The Shah ordered her imprisonment, and within weeks, her name was removed from every record, as if she had never lived. Yet the maids of the palace swore that her voice still echoed through the halls on moonless nights, whispering courage into the hearts of those who came after her. Such stories became forbidden, passed in secret from mother to daughter, servant to servant. They were reminders that even within the heart of fear, rebellion could bloom. The forbidden truth of the Persian palace was not only about cruelty, it was about power disguised as divinity. The empire wrapped its control in sacred rituals and called it tradition. The people worshipped beauty, not knowing the suffering it hid. The Shahs ruled for centuries, believing they had silenced their women forever. But history, like the desert wind, does not forget. Beneath the ruins of Persepolis and Susa, archaeologists have found fragments, poems, broken seals, and carvings that hint at these hidden stories. They tell of princesses who prayed for strength, who dreamed of freedom, and who, even in silence, left their mark on eternity. Because the truth of the Persian palace was this: the empire's greatest fear was not invasion, rebellion, or betrayal. It was the awakening of the voices it tried to bury. Centuries have passed since the golden palaces of Persia gleamed beneath the sun. The marble floors that once echoed with the footsteps of queens and kings now lie in ruins, kissed by the desert wind. Yet even among the broken stones of Persepolis and Pasargadae, something lingers, not the sound of power, but the memory of silence. The stories of the Persian princesses were never written in the official histories. The royal scribes praised the kings, chronicled the wars, and celebrated the empire's glory. But the women's stories lived only in whispers. They were erased from scrolls, buried in poetry, and hidden behind centuries of reverence for power. And yet their absence speaks louder than any record. It tells us that what was once feared most by the empire was not rebellion, but remembrance. In the hidden folds of history, the princesses became symbols of unspoken strength. Their fear, that haunting dread of the wedding night, became a mirror for every woman who lived under the shadow of tradition. Though they were denied voices in life, time transformed them into echoes of endurance. Historians may debate the truth of their rituals, but the emotional truth remains undeniable. Beneath the golden crowns and silken veils, they carried a pain too sacred to name. The Persian Empire believed it could bury its secrets under marble and myth. But fear, like truth, does not decay. It seeps into the stones, the songs, and the bloodline of memory. Every civilization that came after Persia carried pieces of that legacy, the balance between beauty and bondage, pride and pain. The silence of those princesses became a warning carved into the heart of history, that even the mightiest empires fall when they silence their women. In later centuries, poets and scholars began to uncover traces of these forgotten daughters. Ancient verses written in secret were found woven into fabrics, carved into pottery, or hidden in tombs. One fragment, translated from Old Persian, reads, They feared the night not for its darkness, but for what power made of it. Another poem, attributed to an unknown royal consort, laments, I was taught that love is light, yet mine was shadow. I smiled as a queen, but I died as a woman unseen. These fragile lines became more than poetry. They became confessions from the past. Modern historians still debate whether these stories were literal or metaphorical. But beyond academic debate lies something more powerful, the emotional truth of human experience. The Persian princesses, real or symbolic, represent every woman who was ever silenced by duty, confined by tradition, or defined by fear. Their legacy stretches far beyond their empire. It belongs to every generation that seeks to turn silence into voice. And yet, there is beauty within their tragedy. For in their quiet endurance they left behind a hidden rebellion. They endured what the world demanded, but their sorrow shaped the conscience of civilizations to come. Over time, their unspoken defiance became the seed of change, a reminder that fear can be inherited, but so can courage. Today, when we walk through the ruins of the Persian palaces, we may not hear their voices, but we can feel them. In the wind that sighs through the arches, in the carvings that depict goddesses once worshipped for their wisdom, and in the faint trace of stories that refuse to die. The wedding night that once symbolized fear has become, through history's eyes, a symbol of endurance. It represents the human spirit's ability to survive beneath the heaviest chains of power and expectation. And though the Persian princesses lived and died in silence, their legacy speaks louder with every century that passes. Their fear became history's reminder that true power lies not in control, but in compassion. That empires rise and fall, but stories never truly vanish. And so, the final echo of their tale lingers. They feared their wedding night. But through that fear, they taught the world what it means to endure, to remember, and to rise beyond silence.